And I asked her, I didn't know where it was. Like, Rach, where's the red box? She's like, oh, it's in the other room. So she went to bed and went to grab it. 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm hiding in the bathroom, the light off, using my phone light to read my life insurance policy to see if suicide would be covered and to see if they would get a payout. Because I had gotten to the point where I was like, I am so much better off just getting them this payout than anything else.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
We are live in the new BP studio to bring another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters related to race, especially race in corporate America. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. So we're excited to bring this episode to you today. But before we get started, we want everyone to remember to check out our partners at Code M Magazine, whose mission is by saving the Black family by first saving the Black man. So definitely give them some mad love at codemmagazine.com. That is codemmagazine.com. Okay, today we are welcomed by Matt Schuster, co-founder of ADDRA Labs, who will recount his remarkable journey. And the thing about it is we've all been in this type of situation, which Matt is going to go over. So think about this for a second. At 37 years old, Matt was thriving as a chief revenue officer at a high-tech company. He was traveling worldwide and making a very nice little penny, okay? Despite his outward success, he had some inner turmoil that led him into making a life-altering decision, abandoning his career without a safety net. And that's something we all think about if you've been in that situation. So Matt today will discuss what motivated him for this bold move, the emotional roller coaster that he went through, and the invaluable lessons that he learned from navigating uncertainty. Matt Schuster, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my brother.
It's great to be here, man.
Buddy, it's great to see you, man. You're looking good. All right, you look in shape. Look at you.
I'm just trying to look as good as this new studio.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you can look that good. But, you're working on it. But look, man, so excited to hear, your story that you're going to talk about today. Obviously, you and I have been friends for a long period of time. And one of the things that you ended up doing is something that a lot of people struggle with, right? So I know people hearing your journey today, you're going to help a lot of individuals. But before we get started, man, tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and where you currently reside.
Yeah, so I currently live in northern New Jersey, a little town called Glen Rock. My wife and we have two kids, Jack and Max, they're 9 and 5, and our dog Howie. And, made our way through to Jersey in a pretty typical fashion of what you would see from, the corporate America, where, you start by getting a job in New York City, you make ends meet, you find it's the most affordable housing you can find. Mine was almost a shoe closet. And then you make your way up, you get a little bit nicer apartment as you make a little more money, find your way to either Brooklyn or Hoboken, and then eventually you make the jump to have kids and retreat to either northern New Jersey, Westchester, or, into Connecticut.
Okay,
and go to the burbs. So it was as unique snowflakes as we all think we are. We all follow a pretty similar pattern.
So tell us a little bit about your kids. How many kids you have? What's their ages, names?
Yeah. So Jack and Max, so 9 and 5. Jack is, just actually starting to follow in the footsteps. He joined the swim team recently.
Okay.
Max is still figuring out what his strengths are.
Okay.
But he has definitely the gift of gab.
Okay.
So
all right.
It's never boring.
So you must get that from your wife, though, right? Is that what I mean?
Oh yeah, sure.
And tell us about your lovely wife.
Yeah, my wife Rachel. She's worked for a number of years in PR in the city. Continued working when we moved into Jersey. and made the really, really hard decision to step away from working for a bit, as we were getting the kids up to school age. And now we just put Max went into kindergarten. So she actually just started working a few months ago again, and has been incredible to see her go from the chief executive officer of our house and taking all those skills and then applying them in a work setting. And for the longest time, I've always said, I was like, you have so much potential to take all the skills that you developed over the last 5 years and just thrive. You will run circles around everybody if you go back to work. And sure enough, it happened, like
Good.
almost to a T. So
That's awesome.
It's been fun to see.
That's awesome. So you have a very successful family. That's great. Tell us, man, why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
So this is, I think this will be the first time I've ever talked about it publicly from start to finish. You've known me for quite some time, and talking about the topic of mental health is no longer controversial, but I don't know that people necessarily recognize what that means. And, I'm someone that, especially now, if I can share at least some of the things that I've learned through this most recent journey and it can help somebody else, that's a win. And
Awesome.
That's really what my goal was here.
Well, thank you, my brother. And I'm pretty sure you will. So are you ready to talk about it?
Let's talk about it.
All right, man, let's talk about it. So Matt, man, I mean, that is awesome. You've had a, successful family. You've had a successful career, my brother. So why don't you talk to us a little bit from the beginning? Tell us a little bit about your career. And then how did you get to the level where you were just like, I'm done with this and I want to walk away?
Yeah. So it, started working immediately out of school and found success within the sales ranks. Stumbled my way into advertising technology, and pretty early on, I knew I had a skill set, which was being able to connect and have conversations with people, and that really translated into ability to convert sales. And you and I started working together at our former company, right. And that's where I went from unconscious aware or unconscious competent to a little bit more conscious competent, because I was able to learn a little bit more from someone that's been doing it for a bit.
So just so everybody's on the same page, right? When you say unconscious competent to conscious competent, what do you mean by that?
So the whole theme of unconscious competency is people that have raw talent, but they're not aware of why they're successful. They just know that if they do things and push hard enough, they will achieve some success, but they can't really replicate it, and they couldn't really tell you how they did it. And a lot of that just comes from experience. A lot of that comes from learning and tutelage and having a good mentor. And Tony and I got a chance to work together for almost 7 years, I believe. And, working directly together for most of that time. And he was able to really pass a lot of his knowledge and skill from both being a salesperson and as a sales leader onto me and the rest of the folks on the team. So, we really, within that group, rose to the top. I became one of the top salespeople at that organization, translated that into what's the next step. If you're a good salesperson, you become a sales manager. So naturally, it's, I have to do more, and you make a little bit more money. And then I was a good sales manager, and I was like, you should be a VP and manage a region. And then you're like, that's the logical next step. And again, just you get onto this ladder, and people say climb the corporate ladder. And yes, it's a very good thing. And yes, if that is your true purpose and direction and vision, 100%. But if you're just doing it because it's like, that's what you're supposed to do, I guess that's what we do next. And, eventually I got to the point where I had the opportunity to step into a really cool company that needed a lot of the skills that I had. And it was a top sales executive role, so the chief revenue officer. Essentially, it's 1 degree below the CEO of a company. And you're talking about big responsibility. You're managing an entire org, You're managing P&Ls. You're talking about mergers and acquisitions. You're opening new offices all over the world, and it's a big job.
So hold on one second though, because I love that you got to that, but I want to make sure that the audience understands that this is not an easy thing to do. Okay, so to go from being an account executive, a salesperson, okay, and then obviously there's a lot of great salespeople that drive revenue. They do very, very well. Okay, however, they're not all made to build a team out, and then more importantly, be able to get to a leadership role where then just not a sales manager or a sales director or a VP. Now they're on the C-suite. Okay. And that's what you did. I just want to back up a little bit, right? That's what you did at an early age. So let's be fair. Talk a little bit about you got to that C-suite level, right? Because you have a seat at the table. How old were you at that time?
When I took the role, I was 35.
So you were 35 years old.
Yeah.
All right. A kid that started with nothing and worked his way up. He talked about that in Conscious Competency, raw talent, right? And at the end of the day, he was willing to do what it took. And more importantly, he definitely did all the hard work and own that yards, but he was able to listen to other individuals and take that advice and then hone his skills where you were able to get to the C-suite. So, buddy, I just want to make sure, because this ain't something that everybody does, and I just want to make sure we give you some accolades for because I've worked with you, I've known you for almost 20 years now, so that ain't easy to do.
It's not. You're right. I appreciate the kudos, and I think when it comes to in the boardroom skill sets and in the office skill sets, 100%, like that's something that you have to develop and you have to excel at over time. There was, one of the things that I really want to focus on and talk about is there's another skill set that you either have or need to develop if you want to be successful in life in general, but especially in a high pressure trajectory or situation like that, which is proper mental health hygiene and proper mental strength. And that was something that, we're not that old, but when I first started working, that wasn't even something that was talked about, right? If you said, oh, I need to take a mental health day, people look at you.
They look at you crazy, right?
Like, oh man, well, Matt's lost it. All right, better start looking for a replacement.
Unfortunately, that's real. That's what happens. That's why people keep their mouth closed.
And that was something that, I was silently struggling with through that entire trajectory, even all the way back to when I first started working. If I'm being honest, probably all the way back even before I started working, which is that I never learned the importance and the skills to have, strong mental health hygiene. And when we talk about that, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And I'll put out the disclaimer, I'm no expert in this. This is purely based off of my own experience and what I found works. And clearly a lot of the things I found did not work because it took me until I was 37 and in your breakdown to start learning those skills. But there were small signs every step of the way. So if we go into even when I was just selling, I would have, almost like an on-off switch. There would be periods of extreme delight and there would be periods of just absolute sorrow. And those swings would be so high and low on a regular basis. And what was happening was, and what I didn't realize was that I was tying my entire self-worth and self-validation into what my output was from my career. And when I was selling, that meant, did I close the deal or not? When I was managing, it was like, did we hit our numbers or not? And then, obviously those pressures grow because success becomes less and less in your control the higher that you get. And when your entire identity and your entire validation system is tied up in the approval of others or the existence of success in some material format, you're doomed to fail because that's not there's a saying that I've learned since, kind of moving into this next iteration of life, which is success is never owned. It's only borrowed. And if you think about that, it means that just because you're having a good day one day, it's almost guaranteed that it's not going to last. Right. And you have to be able to be happy and sure and strong with yourself, even on the bad days, not just on the good days. And those were things that wasn't even aware of, didn't even think of to work on as I was becoming older. And we would deal with it, or I would deal with it on my own in probably unhealthy ways. Using. Say unhealthy ways, like what do you mean? It would either be suppression of feelings, just pushing it down, saying that's not. You just don't worry about it. Other people are happy. Comparison to others. Vices. Going out, drinking alcohol, and basically just putting off the hard work to, I'll feel better tomorrow. I'll deal with it then. And that just, it creates a monster in the closet that just gets bigger and stronger and eventually is going to break out, which it did in spectacular fashion.
So let me ask you this, buddy. So you just said a lot. I just want to make sure that everybody's following along, right? So here's a young man that, on the outward standpoint, is very successful. You're likable. You had a lot of people that always thought highly of you. You were able to build your network. You were able to build your brand at multiple organizations till you got to a point where you're sitting on the C-suite. However, from an internal standpoint, you're a mess, okay? Your moods, your emotions are going up and down, excited, depressed. Then there's the next 6 minutes, right? From material things, if I won the sale, I'm euphoric. If somebody canceled, I'm down.
Right? Yeah, but it would got to a point when it would be severe. It wouldn't even be extreme scenarios like that, like winning a big sale or losing it. It would be somebody reacted weird to an email I sent. Or somebody gave me a weird look that didn't quite register of, I wonder what's going on. I wonder if they hate me now. And when you're in that level of sensitive state, everything and anything will trigger you, and both ways. So someone could give you a compliment and you're like, I could do anything. I could take over the world. And then somebody could ignore you walking by you in the hallway and you're like, well, it was a good run.
Let me ask you this though. So, and again, and obviously you and I work together, right? We communicated and talked about a lot of things, right? You had a lot of friends, you had family. Did you communicate to people about how you felt?
No, because I didn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. All I knew was I thought I was different and just experienced the world differently than others. Mm-hmm. And things would trigger me, and that was my problem to fix. Right. And what's funny is now on the other side, the more I talk about it, the more I realize, everybody feels like that. And everybody has those emotions, but nobody talks about it.
Exactly.
I will say, like, my wife, Rachel, is an absolute saint because I say I didn't talk about anybody. I always talked about everything with her. And she would be everything. She would be my biggest cheerleader. She'd give me the tough love when I needed it. She would be my reality check. The number of emails that I've read to her saying, hey, read this. Does this sound like someone doesn't like me? Or, go through this. Let me explain this situation. Did I do that wrong? And, every single time she was there with a, unbiased, like, yeah, you screwed up. Like, or I don't know what you're being so sensitive about. They're clearly just busy. Like, don't be so sensitive. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And she's seen it. She has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And she still wants to hang out with me, which is awesome because I wouldn't want to hang out with me.
Maybe the life insurance policy might have something to do with that, right? Yeah, I mean, you did get a lot of stock options at the companies you worked at. But let me ask you this, my brother. So, there's an old saying, and we used to talk about this: new levels, new devils. Okay? So at the end of the day, as you started rising up through the corporate ladder, up the corporate ladder, I should say, those emails, those conversations, those looks only intensified because now the responsibility that you have is not just, did I close this sale for hitting my numbers? It's now I'm running an organization and I'm responsible for the whole organization's revenue, right? So talk about a little bit how that rubber band that you were on, and tell us when it snapped. And then when you then when you decided that I got to stop doing this.
So I'll add one additional point is that as you move up in terms of rank and responsibility, not only does the pressure and responsibility grow, but your peer set shrinks. So the number of people that you can ask thoughts on or compare notes with, or even just confide in gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I've made huge mistakes where I've confided in people that I definitely should not have, and it's come back to bite me.
So we'll stay right there for a second, because there's a couple things here. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot. I don't want to miss this. Okay. So number one, let's back up. One of the fears when we talk about mental health issues is that we don't want to talk about mental health issues, right? So we hold everything in. And then we do, as you talked about your wife being there for you, listening to you, the whole 9 yards, right? But you make a good point here. As you move up the corporate ladder, your confidants shrink. And then the other thing that's important with that is that the way people look at you, right? Not everybody who says, there's an old saying, not everybody who says they're a brother is a brother. Not everybody who says they're a friend is a friend, because now it's like competition. Now is people are looking for your weaknesses so they can exploit them, right? To diminish you so then they can be able to, get more power or whatever the case may be. So you just said a key thing here is that it shrank and you confided in people that you shouldn't have, that didn't do the right thing from you. How did that make you feel, especially from a mental health standpoint?
Well, I think it's more of exposing yourself and exposing what others might perceive as weaknesses. And, people are ambitious naturally. And especially when you're working in an industry like advertising or finance, where it's very competitive, everybody's looking to get ahead. If you expose something like that, it can naturally be leveraged for, their benefit. And as you grow within an organization, and to the point of that peer set shrinking, I was in a position where my immediate peer set was pretty much zero. Right. So I didn't have a left or a right that I could work with or confide in or talk to. So due to the nature of the organization. So everybody was either above me or one level below, it's very hard. That is, and we'll transition more into kind of the internal mental strength components of that. But you have to be a very strong individual to thrive in an environment like that. Your validation system needs to be completely independent of anybody else. Your priorities, your self-worth, you need to be able to combat a number of different mental health factors like negative self-talk, and really be sure and on board with who you are as a human, because, the pressures that come along with something like that, they can really make you question literally everything down to your core. And, so when I was in that role, I didn't have any of that structure. I went in just, I was good at that, I'll be good at this, and I'll figure it out, and then so on and so forth. I think it was the summer of 2019, and things could not have been going better. The company was doing incredible. We were crushing our numbers. We all know what's coming down the line at the end of 2019 into 2020, but that actually didn't play much of a factor in my situation. But really what happened is I didn't realize it at the time. Everything within my self-support structure was tied on the trajectory of the company. And then right towards the end of the summer, it wasn't that things started going poorly, but things started to slow down a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's, what are we doing? How are we going to fix this? Why are we not growing as quickly?
You mean the company's revenue started slowing down?
Sorry, the growth.
The growth started slowing down, yeah.
Why is this international market not doing as good as that one? And all of a sudden it went from like extreme praise for months and months and months and months to a lot of finger pointing and questioning, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing there? And, looking back, hindsight bias, it's very easy to say like, oh, of course I fell flat. It's because I was completely supported by the growth of the company and I had nothing behind it. There was no part of my identity that had any strength beyond I'm the CRO of this company and it's doing it really, really, really well.
So when it started doing bad, because that's where your identity was.
So here's the thing, though. That's probably the most frustrating part. Is what didn't start doing bad. Right. It was things needed to be optimized even more than they were. Like total revenue was continuing to grow, which I couldn't wrap my head around. I'm like, if we're doing better, why does this feel so much harder? And it was because the company was starting to mature. And we were starting to look at new metrics. We started to look at profitability. We're starting looking at optimization of lines and offices and markets. And, if the goal is just grow revenue, that's not easy, but that's a whole lot easier of a strategy than grow this specific type of revenue in this way. And, we went from just, okay, blanket growth to, okay, let's take out the magnifying glass. And it was internalized by me. It was taken personally. And again, it was because everything was wrapped up in that. So I got to a point where at the end, I think it was September or October, I was not able to get out of bed in the morning. Like going to work was such a heavy lift. I was relatively fit when I started the job. I was 40 pounds heavier. My metrics from a physical health perspective were completely in the toilet. And then the biggest thing was there was this negative self-talk narrative running in my head that I had zero control over. And it was there as soon as I woke up in the morning, and it was there all the way until I went to sleep, and it was in complete control. And it's not you. And the more I learn about it, it's not you. It's a misfiring of your body or your mind's protective mechanism.
So you might have asked, what was the negative set? What was the verbiage?
It was everything from, what do you think you're doing? Or you're terrible at this, or you don't know what you're talking about, or how could you be in this role, or how could you make this decision? It manifested itself out where I couldn't make any decisions on my own. I had to get thoughts and feedback from 1,000 people before I'd make a call on anything. I was gun shy. I was nervous talking to people in a public setting where normally I'm not. And then it starts with like the very surface level material stuff, like, oh, you're bad at your job. And then it starts to get into, well, just like, what's the point? Like, what are you doing as a human? Like, you're a bad example for your kids. Like, this is going nowhere. You're going to get fired and you're not going to be able to get another job. And then it keeps going down and lower. And when it runs out of control, it's like a runaway train. And then I remember it was, just after Halloween, the kids had gone to bed. Rach had gone to bed. I couldn't fall asleep. I just had my third panic attack. And I, right before Rach went to bed, I said, we have this red box where we keep all of our like important papers box. And I asked her, I didn't know where it was. Like, Rach, where's the red box? She's like, oh, it's in the other room. So she went to bed. I went to grab it. 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm hiding in the bathroom, the light off, using my phone light to read my life insurance policy to see if suicide would be covered and to see if they would get a payout. Because I had gotten to the point where I was like, I am so much better off just getting them this payout than anything else. And that's where it gets you. It brings you down to your knees because it was just neglected. And I remember the next day I woke up, and again, I just physically was just ill. And Rach looked at me and was just like, "You're going in to quit your job tomorrow." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I know." She goes, No. You are going in and you're giving your 2 weeks notice right now.
Did you share with her about being in the bathroom? And
Not until years later.
Wow.
I didn't,
But
I
she
didn't share that with
saw the effect.
Oh, it was obvious to everybody. Right. I mean, when you gain 40 pounds, it's hard to hide it. You're irritable at home, and, you don't want to do anything, and the idea of fun and friends and all that went out the window. And, so I walked in and I called a meeting with the CEO and was like, "I'm out. I need to step down." And by that point, it was pretty obvious that I was, losing it a bit even in the workplace. So it wasn't a surprise. But yeah.
But one of the things, bro, I'm sorry, bro, but you're like,
Don't be sorry, man.
No,
here?
No.
Never.
But you're like, you're my family, right? We're like brothers. And, to hear that. And, I remember chatting with you during some of that time, right before, because you chatted with me and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to leave my job." And, and I was like, "For real?" And you were like, "Yeah, you remember that conversation we had?" And I just didn't know you were going through that.
Nobody
and it
did.
hurts my heart, man. I mean, it's just, I don't, that, my man.
No, man, it's a hard thing, because when you're in that place, it is.
You still act
so
like you
loud.
were great, though. That was
So
the thing.
loud.
I'm pretty perceptive
You're
in
so
terms
good at, you
that.
get so good at hiding it.
But
You get so good
I
at
thought,
hiding
and if you remember, I was asking you for advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was coming to you, and at the company that I was at, we were trying to do a partnership with your company, right? And I didn't see any of that, right? And it's just to hear you tell this, man, I am so sorry, because I was, I didn't see you day in and day out, but we still communicated, and I had no clue, and I wish I did.
I think the biggest thing is that if you don't understand it yourself, then you view it as a weakness, and the last thing you want to do is let anyone see it. No. And anyone that's suffering with this has automatically gotten very, very good at hiding it, because they have to put on a perception, because the last thing they want is people to know about this and then feel badly or negatively about you. And then that exasperates the problem, because then it's like, oh, well, now they know, and now they're going to think this. And so you bury it down, but at the same time, it goes from a whisper to an absolute roar. And for me, it was, resigned, so gave my time, and then the world shut down within like a month.
And so and you quit, and no.
It wasn't just a clean walk away. So, when you're that level, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I had given notice in November. And then the first, mentions of coronavirus started coming out like late to mid-December we started hearing, and then January is where it started to become. And then once we saw this is going to be like a thing, I went to the CEO and I said, look, this is not the time. Like, I can stay on as long as needed to, shoulder us through this, so there's not just complete turmoil. And so he had me stay on until May. And then obviously in March, everything shut down. So I wasn't actually seeing anybody, but I remember taking the train home March 13th. And I think the lockdown happened a week after that. But I remember looking around like something weird, like we're not going back. This is strange. Right. But at that point, you would think, like, I've resigned, the weight's off your shoulder, you're going to start to feel a little bit better. The opposite happened. So I resigned. And then again, remember, the whole self-worth system was tied up in that job. So now I've taken the job away, and I got to see there was nothing underneath it and nothing left. So I actually went into a deeper spiral of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to find another job? Who's going to hire me now? And now also, the world is shutting down, so nobody's even hiring. So, I talked it over with Rach, and I basically said, look, I need like 6 months, at least 6 months. And I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I just need to be away from things. And that was the story I was telling myself. It's like, it's only 6 months, just take it. And, the first month was, pretty ugly. And then obviously there's not so much you can do when you're locked down. So I ended up finding a spin bike on Amazon for cheap. So I bought a spin bike and I downloaded the Peloton app and I hooked it up to my TV, and I would just go downstairs and do like, I call it my faux Peloton or Peloton, because I didn't want to buy the expensive bike. And I would just go do workouts for, started with 15 minutes, then it was 20 minutes, then it was 30 minutes. And it wasn't the point where I was feeling better. I was like, all right, at least I'm moving and I'm getting some exercise. And that's when when you get into a state like that, you have to heal from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And like, this is probably too much information, but I could tell something was really wrong with me because my sweat smelled different. Like, my body odor changed. And it was only until later I found out that when you have two kinds of sweat. So you have, your typical sweat, perspiration for cooling the body, but then you also have stress sweat, which comes from slightly different glands. And that is a byproduct of the firing of your nervous system, and it carries a different odor. And I basically had that firing for 12 months of just like nervous system that's just completely overloaded, and stress levels and adrenal glands just kind of overworked, and it was strange because once I started working out, I was like, oh, okay. And then over a few months, things started to become a little bit more normal. So what I'm hearing is you had to drop rock bottom. Okay. And what's that old saying? Somebody told me this years ago, is that either you're going into a storm or you're coming out of a storm. And it seems like, because I want to hear the next iteration of your story, you started riding a Peloton bike, right? You were 40 pounds, whatever the case may be, overweight, stressed out, thinking about committing suicide. But then you started pivoting to something else. And then there was an awakening. Speak a little bit about that. Yeah. So not having much to hold on to, I kind of just clung on to exercise as, if you don't have one vice, which is, workaholism, then you pick another one. But I'll take exercise over that. Yeah. So I started doing that. And like I said, the workouts started getting longer. Then the weather started getting nicer. Remember, this was winter. And I started doing, some runs outside. And I had been an athlete. So I was an athlete in college. I did marathons and half marathons when I was younger. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll train for another marathon. So I started running. And naturally, what a lot of us will do is I overdid it and got hurt. And I strained a muscle in my leg. So I couldn't run for a little bit. So what did I do? I was like, well, I was riding Peloton. I have a mountain bike. I'll go ride my mountain bike. So I started riding my mountain bike, and 10 miles became 20, became 30, became 40. And all of a sudden I was gone for, half a day. And I was down on vacation with my sister, and she's, we were in the Outer Banks. She goes, you're already running a ton and riding a ton. She goes, you should just do, an Ironman. And I was like, no way. I'm not going to do one of those. And she's like, no, I think, you're pretty much doing all the work. You might as well. I was like, I'll look into it. So I start, doing my research, and immediately the switch goes off, and it's like, well, this is my entire life now. This is what I'm going to be doing.
But again, let's back up, because you talk about how you go from one vice to another vice, right? How were you feeling mentally as you started getting into working out? Talk a little bit about that. Did it get better? Did you start seeing and feeling a lot better about yourself? Speak a little bit about that.
So after the conversation with my sister, I started, realizing that prioritizing things that were central to myself, into my being, both my emotional being as well as my physical being, were things that people couldn't take away. And I started researching, like, what are the pockets, like, who are the people that have the strongest mental health skills? And, it was like, the military. And I was like, well, I'm almost 40. I don't think they're going to take me.
So, but one thing, when you say the strongest mental health skills, what do you mean by that?
Like, who are the people that can thrive in the harshest of situations? Right?
So they can block things out.
Well, block things out, but to also like manage and be able to perform under pressure, right? Because at that time, remember, my knowledge of this was completely surface level. It was I just can't bear with the pressure as well as other people. So who are people that can bear with extreme pressure? So it was like the military. They are arguably the harshest conditions that you can experience in the world. But that wasn't an option. Nor I don't think Rach would approve.
I don't think I can see you low crawling through a bunch of stuff anyway.
And then the next one I came across was endurance athletes. Having to, especially like the Ironman thing kind of bug was in my ear, and people that can literally endure some of the most extreme situations for hours in really hard conditions. I was like, well, maybe I can use that as a platform to improve, my physical body, but also my mental health skills, so I can cope with things better. And so I started this journey with the purpose of, how do I get stronger mentally and physically? And it really kind of switched and became this platform of self-discovery. So it was no longer, how do I learn to endure? It was more using sport to understand myself. And I started really learning about, I just had this thought. I remember having this thought back when I was working. Why did I have that thought? Where does that come from? That doesn't make any sense. And all of a sudden I had this pillar of, internal value that never existed and it could fall back on, right? It's like, well, you can take away my job, you can take away, my income, you can take away everything, but, being able to go out and go for a run, that is a blessing. Not everyone can do that. And there are days that I can't do that, but the aspiration and desire and what you get from that is not something anybody can take away.
Right. That's for you. That's yours.
It's your thing. It's prioritizing your own self-development. So, I started going on that journey, and I actually made a pitch deck that I gave to Rach. Actually, I gave to Rach and the whole family, and it was, I want this much investment, and I want to take 1 year off, and I want to just train for a triathlon.
So that you didn't lose the chief revenue officer mindset, right? When
No
it came
way.
to that, right?
Oh, I still have the deck.
You still, once you decided, but here's the thing though. The good news is that you found you, right?
Yeah.
And you were able to, like I said, come out of that storm. And I'm so happy you did, my brother. I'm really happy you did. But you were able to come out that storm, and all those things that you went through, as bad as they were, they helped you find you and help find something that you love. And more importantly, how you could love yourself first, that self-worth. That's the most important thing than a job or a title or a car. Because you guys, you left, when you walked away, you didn't have a safety net, right? You didn't have like millions of dollars in savings that you could fall back on and take your time. So that pressure of still being able to take care of the family and stuff to that nature was still there, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. It took a long time to disassociate my self-worth from my income. Like that was a really hard thing to do. And I still I think everyone struggles with it to a certain degree, but those are two very different components of who you are as a human, and how much money you make or your ability to make money is in no way connected to your self-worth. Right. And that's a hard thing because we are like societally conditioned to think the opposite way. It's that like how much money you have and the things that you can buy and the things you can achieve are paramount to who you are as a person. And it's the opposite. It's not the case. And I think that the biggest takeaway that I got from that whole journey was that lesson of, you need to be beyond just someone that does something for a living. You need to be a person who has an identity so that, you can thrive with that. And then all the things you talk about, like you still need to be able to provide for your family. You still need to be able to, buy things, but it can't, it's got to live in harmony. It's got to be a component of your life. It cannot be the driving force of your life.
So, well said. So obviously that was, the working out and Ironman, and more importantly, finding yourself and getting in harmony. But then there's some other great things that came out of that as well, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the company that you started.
Yeah. So as I progressed within the sport, I started to naturally gravitate towards the business side of things, which, is just in my nature from where I came from. And the thing that spoke to me most was the role that nutrition plays within, endurance sport. And that was just really interesting to me. A lot of people don't realize if you're not, heavily competing in these areas, you can go out and go for a run, no problem. Go out, run for 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour. Sure. Come back, have a snack. But if you're going to go out and perform for, 2, 3, 4, 10 hours in some major effort, you need to fuel your body and also fuel the recovery of your body. And it was just so interesting to me how food and food intake played such a big role in how you performed or how you recovered and, ultimately your success in the sport. So I started to really lean in and educate myself. I had a couple of endeavors within, trying to start businesses within that space, started a website, started a little coaching business. But then everything kind of came together when I came across an opportunity to work for a company called Power Bar. Mm. And I'm sure, a lot of people remember the really, really chewy hard bars. They're still around. You can still get them. But they had gone past that. And I got to use a lot of the things I learned from previous life, a lot of things I learned with the endeavors. And I started doing, a lot of their sales and marketing. And then finally it came to a point where my now partner, and I, looked at the opportunity ahead and said, we can continue to work for Power Bar, or we can start our own company. And, we made the decision to make the jump, and we launched ADDRA Labs, which is a brand new, really exciting sports nutrition company. And I never thought I would be co-founding a new brand in a brand new industry in a different sector of everything. And now we're doing and learning things like how to source cherries and, package design, which I've never done any before, but we're learning as we go.
Tell us a little bit, my friend. Obviously, the protein bar industry is worth what, $100 billion, $200 billion industry? Am I right? It's a big one. It's a huge industry. So there's a lot of different protein bars out there. You talk about power bar, there's a million of them, right?
Yeah.
So tell us why ADDRA is the place for people to be. And why is it that there's something that they may want to indulge in? Because there's a lot of people in our audience who work out, they lift weights, they ride, they may even be, triathletes, right? So, and who drink protein shakes, eat protein bars. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's really three main things to call out. So number one is, my partner and I both come from the world of endurance sport, both in the company we worked at as well as athletes. And, we really, we know that area, and there's just so much opportunity to bring new innovation into that. So we wanted to bring a new product for the endurance athletes. And by endurance athlete, I mean anybody that's out there doing human-powered activity. So if you're, snowshoeing or running or cycling or doing triathlon or swimming, anything that involves moving your body over long periods of time. The second thing is we needed to, or really focused on bringing new science. So all of the bars that we created, or all the products we'll release in general, are something that improves on the status quo. The bars that we created here, they're actually optimized down to the level of the amino acids. So you can actually get quite a bit more bang for your buck in terms of how your body processes it, and then it results in performance. And then lastly, they needed to taste amazing. And that's the biggest thing, is that you can have the best product in the world, and if it tastes like garbage, no one's going to buy it. And even if it's guaranteed to make you 10% faster. And we really worked hard to work with a number of food scientists as well as, trained chefs to come up with a combination where we have a high functioning bar that also tastes really good, that doesn't overdo it on things like sugar or fillers. And, the end result is 4 amazing bars. 2 of them are vegan, 2 of them are dairy based. Tony can speak to them. He loves them.
They're tasty too.
Yeah.
They're delicious.
And yeah, so we launched it. The protein bar market is completely saturated. There's 1,001 protein. You can get protein cheese puffs. Right. You get protein Pop-Tarts. Right. But when we look in the world of the endurance sport and endurance athlete, protein and recovery foods is not something that's prioritized. So most athletes are looking outside of the normal companies that are out there. So we saw that there was a need to actually create something that was a protein recovery meal for the endurance world. So that's what we created.
Buddy, I love it. And then for our audience, ADDRA Labs is going to be a sponsor of a Black Executive Perspective podcast. So I really appreciate my friend here, Matt Schuster, because we're going to partner together. But more importantly, man, this part is the happy ending, right? Yeah. Thus far. But final thoughts to the audience, my man. The story that you told, as I teased in the beginning of the episode, was very remarkable, right? Very heartfelt. Me and this guy, like I said, been friends since 2007, it's almost 20 years. And I didn't even know some of the things. And let's just be clear here. I've learned a lot from this gentleman right here, one of the greatest human beings. I'm not saying that to say it. It's a fact. One of the greatest human beings on the planet. And to hear what you went through I'm just so happy that you've bounced back, you found your calling, and you've taken it could have been some of the negative, right? and you've made it a positive, right? Where you found yourself, you love yourself, that negative self-talk is not there. And now you're taking that stuff that you learned from corporate America and you're building your own company. So final thoughts. What do you want to leave to the audience where I can tell you flat out, your story, you're not alone. There's things that you talked about here, I thought about. I didn't think about often myself, though. That part, I just want to be clear. I ain't got to that level. But all that being said, the negative, the pressure. So there's millions and millions of people that felt right in that book. So what do you want to leave them today, my brother?
Oof. I think the biggest message would be, two messages. The first one would be, if something feels off and something doesn't feel right and doesn't feel like it's coming naturally, it's worth looking into. And self-exploration is a big piece of that. And if you're, it's a good opportunity to take stock of where your self-value comes from. And if you find that you get the biggest lift from outside of yourself and just from other people, that's a sign that it might be time to do some work on yourself. And then the second one would be, every idea is stupid until it isn't. And I mean that when I say that, what I mean is, nobody can see the path that you're on or your vision. My idea of, I'm going to pursue, triathlon and see if I can turn that into something. I had no idea. I just knew that going in that direction felt right. And that was something that I was meant to do. And I couldn't tell you that it was going to lead to this, to that, to this, to PowerWar, to starting a company. But if I couldn't see it, then nobody can see it. So don't listen to, if people are out there saying, maybe you should play it safe or maybe you should do that. They can't see the whole picture. Right. So you really need to trust your gut, get yourself values and priorities in order, and then, follow what that, it's corny to say, but follow kind of what your heart is telling you. If you're supposed to go in that direction, go in that direction. Now, I will go on record saying I don't advise everyone to just quit their job and just go pursue their passions. I think I'm an extremist by nature, in case you can't tell at this point. But putting some effort into that can help you in the long run.
Well, number one, we want to thank you, my brother. Here's the thing, though. I just want to say this because this is very important. There's a ton of people who are thinking they're afraid to make that pivot. Obviously, the mental struggles that you dealt with is something, at the end of the day, you had to make a pivot, okay? However, there's people who may not have mental struggles, but they want to do something different. They want to get out of their job. They want to pursue their dreams. Here's some stats. This is by a company called Apollo Technical. This was just done in June of 2024. 14% of Americans believe they have a great job. 14%. 70% are actively looking for a new job. 52% are considering making a career change. And 44% are already planning to do thus far. So what would you tell those individuals who are afraid or who want to get out of their career and they feel that they could do something? You went from a tech C-suite member to now running your own company or doing triathlons, becoming a triathlete, and then doing your own company, right? There's people, I have a few friends of mine that went from corporate America and they was like, I'm done with this. They went back to school and got into the medical field, right? So what advice would you give those individuals who are sitting here, listening to this, watching this, feel exactly that these stats are articulating, and more importantly, you've made that jump? What would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
You're not necessarily going to find the happiness you're looking for just by changing the nameplate that's on your business card. And make sure that, there are definitely people out there where it's valid of, maybe a new career or new job is the right move. But I would venture to guess that a large percentage of that what is that, 86% of people that are not happy with their job probably are maybe putting too much of their self-worth into the job itself, and need to make sure that they have the balance of identity, of self-worth, of self-values and priorities. Because look, every job has
It's going to be, there's no perfect job.
You know, I talk about starting this company like it's super glamorous. There are days where I literally look at the ceiling and go, what am I doing? And this is the hardest thing in the world. But this is not all of who I am. And, you know, a lot of it is probably going to be people fishing for something better for themselves as opposed to a better career. So I would say first and foremost is make sure it's the job and not you. And then if it is the job, absolutely, like, you know, progress is a beautiful thing, and you should always look to, you know, continue to achieve and move up. But just make sure that that's not 100% of who you are and what motivates you.
Awesome, buddy. I love that. So how can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you, Matt?
So the best thing would be to go check out ADDRALabs.com. We're actually going to be, we create a promo code, so BEP, and it'll give you 20% off your first order.
That's it, 20%? Oh, I'm teasing.
Sorry, no?
I'm teasing. That's awesome.
We got to fund the next production. We're bootstrapping this. And then you can also follow us on
Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram at ADDRA_Labs. And follow along for our journey, because we're going to be, you know, producing new products and see how it goes.
All right. That's awesome. So definitely, my man, we're going to put the website up on BEP's website. Follow us, and obviously make sure that you put in that code BEP and you get 20% off. But more importantly, I'm glad that 100% of you is here, because that's the key, right? And I love you a lot. So we want to thank you for coming on the Black Executive Perspective podcast and sharing your story about mental health, about making that pivot, because this is something that everyone, no matter what your color, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, this is something that everyone can relate to, because this is something that we all deal with. So we want to thank Matt, but don't go away, because we're going to have you help us with our with BEP's call to action. All right. So now I think it's time for
Tony's Tidbit.
All right, great. And now obviously the tidbit is always based on the episode. So today's tidbit is this, and I quote, "True success is defined not by external achievements, but by the courage to walk away from what's expected and follow your inner calling into the unknown, moving toward what truly fulfills you." And you heard a lot of that today from Matt Schuster. So we want to thank him. So we also want you to remember that every Thursday, we want you to check out Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton, right? On a Black Executive Perspective podcast, she dives into timely issues that's happening on the world today that you don't have time to check out, but she brings it up on a weekly basis. So you can definitely follow her every Thursday. Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. So check her out. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The courage to reinvent when walking away is the way forward. And now it is time for BEP's call to action. Our mission, our goal is to decrease all forms of racism. So our call to action is something that every person can do. This is in your control, and it's called LESS. LESS. So Matt Schuster is going to help us with our call to action. I'm going to slide this over so he can read what he's supposed to read. All right. So kick it off, Matt.
Learn. Educate yourself on racial and cultural nuances.
Exactly. So L stands for learn, right? So you want to definitely educate yourself on new people, new things, so you become more enlightened. The E stands for empathy. Now, once you've learned, now you should be more empathetic to your friends and colleagues, because now you know what they went through, as now we know what Matt went through when he was dealing with his episode.
And then S stands for share, sharing your insights to enlighten others.
Exactly, right? The more that you can share, we're going to help other people. And the final S is stop. We want to stop discrimination as it walks in our path. So if Aunt Jenny says something at the Thanksgiving table, you say, Aunt Jenny, we don't believe that. We don't say that. And you stop it in your path. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, we'll build a more fair and understanding world. And more importantly, we'll all be able to see the change that we want to see, because less will become more. So you can continue to follow a Black Executive Perspective podcast wherever you get your podcast. And please don't forget to follow us on our social channels of X, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok at A Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, Matt Schuster, who is the co-founder of ADDRA Labs. For the lady behind the glass, Lauren Burke, who made all this happen, I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We love you a lot. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.